And we are back with another episode of Vintage Club Conversations, which is also our finale episode of this season. Today, here we are joined by former CRO turned operating partner at Battery Ventures, Bill Binch, who is helping hundreds of revenue leaders scale their businesses.
Bill Binch is a sales leader turned investor with over 3 decades of experience building and scaling go to market teams across the world. From helping take Marketo public to leading Pendo's global growth, he now partners with founders and CROs at Battery Ventures, helping them navigate the next era of selling where strategy, scale, and AI all intersect.
Welcome to Vintage Club Conversations, Bill.
Thank you, Manisha. It's great to be with you.
Well, Bill, you have spent the last 3 decades scaling sales orgs across geos and growth stages, from being part of the early marketer story to leading global sales as CRO at Pendo during its rocket ship years. When you zoom out and look at that journey, how has it shaped the way you think about building and scaling GTM teams today?
Well, certainly, as you called out, 3 decades of work. This is 29 years to be specific, or as I like to joke, 116 quarters of my life, because that's what CROs think about is quarters like that. There's a tremendous amount of learning. And so at a very high level, some of the learnings I took away was about learning, was about having a continuous desire to be curious and to keep improving myself. Because I started my career at big companies, and what happens at big companies is they spend a lot of money and time training you, and you honestly don't appreciate it, especially when you're young, like I was. You're like, oh, just let me get back out into the field and start selling. But you look back on that and you realize that what they were doing was injecting frameworks and models into you that really help shape how you make decisions in the future. So I think one thing that I've taken over like the 30-year journey of being in the working world is to continually be curious.
Interesting. Well, interestingly, you spoke about frameworks, right? But when frameworks are built, those frameworks usually don't last forever. How do you then decide, this is the time that I should now rethink about this framework? Maybe we have passed this stage. I know it's not like in one day you realize that, it's always a transition. But what are the key, points you see that now it's the time we need to revise this framework?
So there might be a semantic thing here, because I think about like the term playbooks gets used a lot, that like I built, or I was part of the team that built this playbook. And I certainly agree that playbooks have a time and a stage where you're going to use those, and then things adapt, things change. Like, like the internet coming into business in the mid 90s, AI coming into the world right now. It's going to change those things. To me, the frameworks and the models are fundamental things that you like, kind of first principle type of things that I think about, that this is going to help me perform in a consistent manner across time, that it's going to help me make decisions where I can be predictable or dependable to the teams that I work with, so that they start understanding some of the logic of how I make decisions. Because in my experience, there's probably nothing worse than working for a boss that's emotional, that you wake up on Monday and they're telling you go north. And then on Friday, they're like, no, south, you got to go south. That's the direction to go. Being consistent is really important. So to me, a framework is something that's enduring. A playbook is something that you build for a period of time or a stage. And then as you get through that stage, you probably have to adapt that playbook. And quite frankly, like in my current role now as an operating partner, as you stated, I advise a lot of CROs. And one of the mistakes that I try and guide CROs, CMOs, anybody in the go-to-market function from doing is don't assume that what worked at your past company, at your past organization, that it's a one size fits all and it just applies. You have to come in and adjust to the point of your question here. You have to come in and you have to understand, who is my buyer in this new organization? Do I sell enterprise? Do I sell velocity? What's the culture of the business? What's the sales cycle length? There's so many factors that I wish I could create a document that's like, hey, here's what you do in this situation, but it just doesn't exist because there's so many variables to it. So the advice I try to give go-to-market leaders when they come into an organization is don't come in and talk about a playbook as though it's verbatim, because it's not. You're going to come in and you're going to find a company at a different stage with a different buyer with a different motion, and you're going to have to adapt those core learnings that you have. So take what you learned, and like this goes back to my first comment to you, Manisha, about always being curious, is there are probably stages in my career where I was more curious versus not curious, right? There's times that I probably like thought like I knew it, and like I kind of flatlined on my own personal development, my professional development. And now I spend a lot of time thinking about, well, how do I keep growing? Like today, we're sitting here in October of 2025. What I am thinking about a lot is I don't want to be the SaaS guy in the AI world.
Yeah. And that's, I think, hard to do, right? I mean, because you have been thinking about SaaS concepts from so long, and all of a sudden, and this shift has happened really, really fast. But, as you said, no matter how much tech or market dynamics change, fundamentals remain the same. So you just need to move fast in this world, and the speed is just crazy.
So true.
Yeah, so since you mentioned AI, you don't want to be a SaaS person, you want to be a AI person. You wrote a very powerful piece recently. Why I'm leaning into Gen AI for sales, and you should too. And you touched on something that really resonated. Reps spending 70-80% of their time on non-buyer facing work. We have touched on this a lot when we really explain why I founded SiftHub. So I'm really curious about your take on this.
Yes, let me break this into a couple things. First of all, the piece that you're referring to, I feel really fortunate, Manisha, that I came out of college right as the internet was finding its way into the business world. So I lived through that. I next lived through the transition from software into the cloud. I next lived into the transition of mobile. And now we're watching this transition to AI. And I think the shift to AI is as big as the internet coming into the business world. So that's what motivated that piece was I'm leaning in because I feel like I'm a student right now because I've just spent so much time in 2025 learning and relearning the way business is going to be done. And so it goes right to your question about that today, 70 or 80% of a sales rep's time is not in front of the customer. I mean, think about that. Like say a sales rep works 40 hours a week. That's saying like 8, 10 hours of their time is in front of buyer level like communications. It means that the other time is spent on internal meetings, training, forecasting, prospecting, deal prep, all these different areas. And it just seems so obvious to me that if you look at disruption in a zillion markets, think about that there used to be this thing called DVDs that we went to Blockbuster Video to go rent. And then it became Netflix mailed them to us. And now we get them delivered to us, just streamed straight to us, right? You think about disruption. You think about, we used to get out of an airport and call a taxi. And today we call an Uber or a Lyft or something like that. You look at these areas that have been disrupted. This is an area that is ready to be disrupted. So let me give you two thoughts of how I think about this. I think about nearly 30 years ago coming out of college and what was available to me as a young sales rep, right? Like I worked for Oracle Corporation. I was given a proprietary CRM system. I was given a landline telephone and I was given a $1 million quota, right? Like those three things were like those are the anchor of what I was given. Today, that same student that's graduating and getting their first sales job comes out and they walk into on what I've read to be an average of 10 to 12 different SaaS applications and now AI applications. They have multiple forms of communication. They have phone, they have social, they have WhatsApp, they have Slack, they have all these different ways to communicate with potential buyers. And then they're given a quota that's probably less than $1 million. And so right there, I look at that and I go, wow, 30 years have changed. All these productivity enhancements have come in. Yet are we more productive? Like I really I wrestle with that and try to reconcile that in my head. Like, are we really productive? So that was number one, the thought that went into my head. And then the second thought to me was, what if I was a seller? Put me back in the selling days and 20, 25% of my time was in front of the buyer. What if you increased that to 35%? Well, I know what would have happened in my case. I would have made a lot more money because I would have sold a lot more software. And I think everybody that's a really good seller probably thinks the same thing. The more time I could be in front of buyers is more time that I could be selling whatever my product is for my organization. And so I'm really excited by the shift that I think AI can bring into the selling world on being able to reduce a lot of that stuff that distracts sellers from being with their buyers. So back to what I said about deal prep, about prospecting, about building the messages, about reviewing the deal inside of my company. And also really importantly, this is an area that I'm specifically excited about, is we all know that every sales rep, when they join a new company, we build a ramp for them before we put them onto full quota. So like they start on November 1st and you're not going to go onto full quota till February 1st or something like that. That area, I think, Manisha, will be compressed very quickly, because I think with AI, the challenge of the ramp was always, how do we put the brand new seller in enough buying situations? Well, I could ride along with a mentor and listen to their sales calls. Well, today we are recording calls. So number one, that should be collapsing the time. But number two is we're advancing to a place where we're going to be doing simulations. Like I'm going to get on a call just like this and you're going to be the buyer. And I'm going to be able to turn the dial up and down on like, are you a 1 or a 2 today? Or are you going to be a 9 or a 10 today, and be really difficult with me and really thorough with me and really difficult with me? And that is going to, I think, compress the time of how fast we have reps ramp. So all of the background work, all the administrative work that sales reps do, I think we're in that. It's interesting. We're sitting here in October 2025. I wonder how this podcast is going to age like a year from now. If we'll look back and be like, oh my gosh, like all the stuff you said, like that's just like, that's so 6 months ago, right? It's happening fast. That's the thing that's super exciting.
Yeah, we were doing a recap of our podcast earlier this year from Jan Feb, and we were like, oh my god, this sounds so archaic. Like we have already
Yeah.
moved so much ahead in future. So I totally agree with you. Also on your point, Bill, that every sales reps uses 8 to 10 kind of tools every day. I was speaking to a CRO and she was like, SaaS founders like you have created this problem. You have created a SaaS tool for everything. I was like, don't
Yeah.
worry, I'm
Yeah.
solving that problem by consolidating everything now.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, look, I guilty as charged. I am part of the generation that created this SDR model that exists today. Like my first role when I came out of college was an SDR, and that is vastly changing right now. Likewise, of what you spoke with that CRO about, I was part of that process that was just consuming tools to arm my sales reps with. And that's a really interesting observation that I've been seeing. And let's time bound this. This is October 25. Over the last 6 months, CROs I've been talking with are still buying things, but they're
Yeah.
building things in addition. And you're seeing this show up because the build could be something that's agentic. It could be a workflow. It could be an integration. It could be a full blown application, but they're building. And that's a new muscle that CROs are exercising, because traditionally CROs went and consumed off the shelf packaged software and brought that into their organization. And today they're doing that in combination with building new things.
Yeah, that's a very interesting point, Bill, because with all the, easy to deploy or easy to code kind of tools coming in, Lovable, Replit, N8N, there are just tons of tools there. Do you think these apps are actually getting into production and are being adopted by users? Where do you think this build versus buy world will go? I mean, in SaaS we saw this, right? It took at least a decade for buyers to realize that, oh, we don't want to build this, we don't want to build a CRM, we want to buy a CRM. Where do you think this AI shift will happen when it comes to build versus buy?
A fun analogy is I think it's like bell bottom pants, right? Like something that was old or something that was fashionable at some stage becomes old and it goes out of fashion and then it comes back. And I think we're always going to go through these cycles, and the cycles are going to get faster. They're going to get better. So, to answer your question specifically, like when I graduated college, I came out, one of the first products that I was selling was like a third generation forms builder tool so that you could sell it to. And it was interesting because what happened back then, this is in the 90s, if you were a functional leader like a CRO or a CMO and you wanted tools, you went to your IT team, you went to your CIO and said, I want to build this application. And they had to go scope it, find the tools, build it, test it, put it into production for you. And it took forever. And the cloud really collapsed that because now as the functional leader, I could go right to the company and I could take the CIO out of the equation and go right to the company and buy the software that I needed to be able to solve the problems that I had. And sometimes, it took implementation and that might have taken some people from the IT team, but a lot of times that implementation was done right inside the function. And that's where the rise of like sales operations and revenue operation roles came in, as they were really responsible for searching and finding the right tools, buying and implementing, and then managing those tools. So on this process of change of, as a functional leader, I used to go to IT. I now don't need to go to IT because I have this RevOps team that's going to come implement it directly inside my function. What we're seeing, I think, happen right now inside of organizations is that same RevOps team is becoming more technically fluent. And they're not just buying applications, but they're buying in addition to building new things that are out, new workflows and agents that are available to them right now to run their business. So it is an interesting circular like chain of like what do you call it? Circle of life, I guess you'd say, that we started by building things, then we went to buying things, and now we're doing both of those. We're building and buying.
Yeah, totally. Well, when you look across your battery portfolio, and there are so many companies, so many great companies in sales tech, what are you seeing when it comes to AI adoption? What's real, what's noise, and what's quietly changing how teams operate? Are there new roles which are getting defined, or are you seeing any quiet things which are changing?
Two great questions there. I think, first of all, what I'm seeing is almost every company that I work with, and even ones outside the portfolio where I have colleagues and friends working at, all of them are in some stage of building agentic AI type of elements into their business right now. And again, like I said earlier, that could be an agent, it could be a workflow, it could be an integration, it could be a full-blown application. So any of those and all of those is what I'm seeing out there. One of the observations that I'm really trying to pay attention to, and we're early at this stage right now, is, okay, we're taking the time to build something because we're recognizing there's some challenge that's not being served by our current tool stack. So by taking the time and the energy to go do that, how are we going to measure its impact? And this has been a bit elusive right now. Everybody talks about productivity gains, but when I say, okay, put your pencil down, how are you measuring that productivity gain? That's still uncertain right now. So we're still at an early stage. I think, Manisha, we're past the stage of experimentation. I think people experimented for like 2024. And I think 2025 is where people are like actually doing. But it's a brave frontier to be doing right now, because I don't think there's like an answer. Like I have a partner here inside of Battery, Joe Chernoff, who is to marketing of what I am to sales. And he and I talk about this one topic all the time, which is, are there a new set of metrics that are going to emerge from this AI shift? And I think there will be some new metrics that we track in the AI world, but more importantly, our current metrics, they're going to change, right? Like those are metrics that that we're going to look and set new bars or new goals against. So something that used to be considered good might not be considered good anymore. Like take something simple like quota of a sales rep. Like if you think that an average SaaS software seller has $1 million quota or something right around there. To me, if we're seeing productivity enhancements, right? Like if we take a sales rep and grow them from 10 or 20% of their time in front of customers to 30 or 40% of their time, that to me says I can probably expect greater output from that sales rep. So I definitely think we're past experimentation. We're into the doing stage. I do think that there's still there's a lot that we're going to continue to learn, but I think it's a great question that like, what are we seeing out there? Everybody's leaned into AI at this point, in my opinion. And then where it goes from here, like we've got to try to figure out how to measure it. And there's another element of measurement too that I spend a lot of time thinking about, which is a lot of companies out there existed pre 2023, right? Like pre AI, like, at ChatGPT unleashed to the world that year. And so those companies that existed before, they all sold products, they all had customers, and they all had value propositions that they sold to. And today, most of those companies have reinvented themselves to become AI powered or AI enabled. And so I think about those and I say, okay, your development team spent time doing things with AI to make the product better. So how do you quantify the product is better for your customers post AI? And that still has also been a challenge, because I think a lot of the models of how the companies have articulated ROI and value were based on the older product. And today they're slow to catch up. So I'm really encouraging companies that I work with, and like I said, colleagues and friends, to think really hard about that. The other part of your question, Manisha, is about roles. There's roles being created, and I think there's roles that are dissolving at the same time. On the creation side, the observation that I've had over really the last 6 or 8 months is that the go-to-market organizations are becoming more technical. So sales, marketing, and customer success. And what I mean by that is, if you think about a classic profile for a revenue operations person, it's probably someone might have a business degree. They probably have an analyst kind of background or mindset. And they come in and, like I said, they manage a set of tools that work together. They manage a set of workflows that work together for how you run your business. Today, what I'm recognizing out there is you're seeing the word engineer creep into sales, because we're hearing about these roles like go-to-market engineer, prompt engineer, forward deployed engineer, AI builders, or AI natives. And all of them, if you look at, like, I've been paying attention to a lot of job specs, they're computer science degree people. There are people that come in and they have skill set with databases or with scripting, with specific tools, like you mentioned, Replit and Lovable. They have skill sets like that. And that's definitely a click or two to the right of what the old traditional profile of a RevOps person was. So there's definitely that creationism happening. I'm seeing that across companies worldwide. At the same time, there's also roles, back to how are we going to measure productivity, that I think are changing rapidly. I think the SDR role is one of those roles that is fast changing. I think that the SDRs that we have defined today are probably the last generation of what those SDRs will. I think there will be an SDR that sticks around, but I think it'll be vastly different. It'll be an SDR that manages agents, quite frankly. The role of customer success is quickly changing. This is an area that every company forever, for 30 years of me being in business, have wanted to say, how do we create an experience for our customers that solves their issues, answers their questions in a format they want to, right? Because, like, do I want to go online and do it in chat? Do I want to speak with somebody? Do I want to have it done over email? Like, find the format that I want to solve it in and solve it for me quickly. And I do think that compression is happening in CS. So I think the CS roles are going to adapt very quickly. I think SDR roles are going to adapt, and likewise, sales engineering is going to change. Sales engineers inside of organizations where, especially, there's a technical sale, those roles were super hard to ramp. Like, sales engineers were the secret sauce of a lot of companies, and not only that, like, to get the person, it's so funny. Like Manisha, I think about this inside of every company. A new sales engineer joins a company and no one wants to work with that guy or gal, right? No one wants to touch them because they're the green bean, they're fresh, they don't know what they're doing, they don't know how to answer the questions. And so they like get like all like the hard work, they get the crappy deals that they have to go work on. And then one day, it's like overnight, they're suddenly the great SC. And why? Because they've been around for 8 or 9 months and they've been on enough of these crappy calls that now they're like, ooh, you're the good SE. I want you to work. And so then everybody dogpiles that SE and burns them out in like 6 months. And all of a sudden the person's been in the company like a year and a half and like, I just don't want to do this job anymore. I think that role is going to change through AI.
Yeah, I have seen this so many times. This is true with both solutions engineers, sales engineers, or product managers. Initially, when product managers or SEs join, nobody wants to really work with them because you need a lot of context to actually be able to help your sales teams. And then overnight, they become kind of rock stars. Very interesting. So you spoke about multiple metrics, Bill. We spoke about sales teams spending a little more time with customers, how it is going to have impact on their quota. Other than quota as well, I think when it comes to deal cycle and ramp up time, we have been speaking about ramp up time. Let's say today it's taking them 3-4 months to ramp up, but with AI, if it takes them probably 1 month or 2 months to ramp up, this is how the revenue can get accelerated. Do you see companies are actually starting to measure this? They are starting to measure that my sales cycle are getting shorter because if you don't need solutions engineer now, or you have less dependency on SEs, for you don't want to bug them for every simple question, you're responding to your customers faster, so the turnaround time has reduced, right? So do you see companies have started measuring these metrics, or we are still far away, we are still waiting for the adoption to happen and then set a new bar?
I think we're a little ways away from it, not too far, but everybody wants what you just described, Manisha, but I just don't think I mean, I'm sure there's a few companies out there that have seen some compression on deal cycles and stuff like that. And it seems logical because we just talked about ramping reps faster, ramping SEs faster, taking administrative tasks away to put them in front of their buyers with more frequency. Then you think about like the buyer, right? The buyers can self-educate in a better, faster way right now. So maybe they enter the sales cycle with a deeper level of knowledge, or said another way, at a later stage of where they previously were entering. And then you think about the part that sales reps have less control on, which is the like there's the selling cycle and then there's the buying cycle. The buying cycle is when you go into IT, procurement, and legal. And I'm hearing about a lot of companies that are doing things that are speeding up their legal, that like, hey, let's take these red lines and put them into a agent that we built that recognizes all of the changes to these sections that we've done over the last year or two. And let's just go right back to that. And that turnaround, instead of being like a few days, is taking an hour. So you think that should compress that. Same thing with like IT governance, like IT organizations that want to go make sure your security is like up to the level that they're looking for. That round trip will happen faster. So I think we're all visualizing it. Am I seeing it happen right now? On a general basis, no. But do I expect it to? I do.
Yeah, it's so interesting to see how the ripple effects can compound. Like, you're not just dependent on your buyer, the stakeholder you're talking to, the decision maker, but there's IT involved, there's legal involved. If everyone starts using AI, overall, ideally, the efficiency and productivity should boost.
I
So
agree.
we spoke about Bill A's and S's, kind of the lines disappearing or the lines getting blur, I would say. What do you think? Will A's lead the deals without S's, or S's will step up and lead the deals and will not need sellers?
Wow, great question. Great question. Again, back to what I said earlier in the show here. Like, I don't think there's a one size answer. I think it depends what you sell and who you sell to. I mean, if you sell a $25,000 a year deal and that deal cycle takes 45 days to get done, the question I have is are you going to need an SC for that in the future, or are we going to enable the AE just to carry the whole cycle? Because just think about that concept, right? Like a $25,000 deal, it comes into your company, someone knocks on the door interested in a demo, an SDR talks with them and qualifies them. They hand that to the sales rep. The sales rep takes it as far as they can, and then it gets beyond their technical skill set. So they ask the SE to come in. They come in, they close the deal, and then you hand it over to the post-sale side, which could be implementation and services. It could be education. It could be a customer success rep or an account manager over there. And if you're doing that all for a $25,000 deal, that's a really expensive process. And I think that's what we've learned over the last 15, 20 years. So do I think that's going to become more efficient? I certainly do. Do I think that AEs in some situations are going to consume what the SE role used to do? I do. I think that they're going to have the skill set and we're going to have the tools to be able to be on a call like this and to go back and forth. And even if I don't have the knowledge or the answer to the question you just asked me, I'm going to be able to get it in an authoritative, credible way that makes you feel comfortable. And then vice versa, you might have super complex deals that require like lengthy implementations, long sales cycles and very, very complex company-wide or enterprise-wide type of usage that are still going to be very technically heavy on the dependents. And so the SE role is still going to be there. Will the SE role consume the sales rep? That's a really provocative question. It's hard for me to picture that because today the roles are so separate. Like the AE to me is the resource leader, right? Like they're the ones that are bringing in their product teams, their SEs, their executives. Whereas the SE is really doing the linkage to me between the technical solution and the business problem. And those seem like two different things to me, but it is a really provocative question on will those collapse down and get closer?
Well, I have seen this happening with a couple of our users this year. They were SEs using our platform and now they are AEs. So it was pleasantly surprising for me also, but I'm looking forward to how this role will evolve.
Me too. Like I said, it's a great question. I'm glad you asked it. I don't have a definitive answer of where I'd place my bet, but it sounds like you have some data points, so it's really interesting.
Yeah. Well, last one before we wrap up this section, Bill. We are nearing the end of 2025 and it's been a wild year as we discussed for AI and GTM. What are the top trends you're watching as we head into 2026, both AI and beyond? Well, there's nothing beyond AI, but still.
As we've talked about today, I think there's some unbridled enthusiasm for trying agentic type of ideas and implementing them into our company. But it's kind of the Wild West out there. And I think as you and I just chat about, I think in 2025, I think companies will probably try to put their arms around some of this because I've talked to some companies that have thousands of experiments running. And to me, I kind of look at that and say like, well, how does that work? Is it one sales rep that's doing their own personal experiment? Or is it, one sales rep that finds one and you deploy it to thousands of people? Like we're going to have to put our arms around it. So to me, in trying to foresee what I think some trends will happen in 2026, I think one of them for sure is that companies will say like, okay, hold it. Like we can continue to experiment, but there's 3, 4, 5, 10 really focused use cases that we're going to invest in and make corporate wide and have everybody utilize inside of the organization. So I think it's gone from like the early, like 2022, 2023 were like the early edge leaders, the folks that were the first people to experiment, and that started widening, got through 23 and 24. Now 25, everybody, like I said, like every company across my portfolio and outside of the portfolio that I know of are trying something. And then I think like it's gotten really wide, and I think it's going to narrow in into 26 as people say, okay, let's just not keep experimenting for experimenting's sake. Let's really focus in on where we think agentic or AI, like workflows and tools can have an impact on our business. Because back to what we said, it's unmeasurable right now. We're not sure what the productivity impact is, but let's go take some areas that we feel really, really convicted will have a positive impact on our organization, and let's implement those.
Interesting. I just have 10 more follow-up questions on this, but unfortunately, we will have to move to our next section. I think our listeners are going to have a lot of takeaways from this conversation. Tons of amazing insights, tons of, I think, follow-up questions, which probably we'll talk about next year. But for now, we are going to set aside work for a moment and get to know more about you as a person. Are you ready?
Okay. Okay. I hope so. Let's go. Let's give it a whirl.
Let's go. You have lived and led teams across US, Japan, even in Australia. Which city has felt most like home to you and why?
Well, I live in Scottsdale, Arizona, and I've been here for 18 years, total of 22 years of my life. It's home. It's home. Like, you always think about where did you grow up and stuff like that. And that was California. But, Scottsdale, Arizona, where I live right now is truly like that place where like, it's my happy place. When I get off a plane, I'm happy to be here. The feels of it are great. But that said, getting to know me a little bit, I'll tell you some of the greatest cities in the world, in my opinion, outside of the U.S. So, as you mentioned, I had the fortune and pleasure to live in Sydney, Australia. One of my favorite places on earth. It's just such a beautiful country. The people are so good. They're so healthy. They love to eat. They love to live life. It was just such an enjoyable time. So anytime I can visit there, I'm happy to. I was in Japan earlier this year. I love cultures and countries that are very, very, I guess you'd say like A type of personalities. Like Japan is so precise, it's so on time, and I love that element of precision that they have. Likewise, if you've never been to Switzerland, it's one of my favorite vacation places to go. Obviously a lot of watches are made, and so you talk about Swiss watches and Swiss timing, another precise culture. And then London. When my wife and I got married, we had two cities on our bucket list that we would have loved to have lived in. One was Sydney, which we checked off, and the other one was London. We just find that London, like culturally, is just, I don't know, it's the center of the earth to me, or the center of the world to me, of where things happen for business, for culture, for people, for all these things. So some great cities that you referenced there.
Yeah. A couple of weeks back, I was in London, and my new year is going to be in Sydney this year. So I'm super excited about it.
Good for you. Call me up for some recommendations. I had a friend that just went down there, and I had some restaurant and some sights to see. So such a great place.
Sounds good. When you're not thinking about scaling revenue orgs, what's something you genuinely obsessed with right now? Could be a hobby, podcast, book, even a new workout.
So I always say this, Manisha. There's always a soundtrack playing in my head. So I love music. The camera here is on me, and that's the Great Barrier Reef from Australia right behind me. But what you can't see is I have guitars and amplifiers and pictures of Jimi Hendrix and stuff like that on my walls right over here. I love music. It's a consistent in my house. I have two boys, 12-year old and a 9-year-old, and they love music because we're constantly playing music. So they've gotten to the age where we like going to concerts and things like that. So one thing that's just a consistent in my life is music. I just like a certain song will take me back to a memory and take me back to a
Yeah.
place sometimes. So, and when you say something that I obsess over was your question, music's always kind of going on.
Yeah, I think songs is one thing. This is a universal fact that one thing which can relate or take you back to your memory is music or is songs, specific songs.
I'm 100% with you.
Yeah. Let's say work is off limits for a day. What's your ideal bill day off? Where are you? Who's with you? And what are you doing?
So, like I said, I have 12 and 9-year-old boys. It is such a fun age to be with them. So, we're probably outside doing something. One of the reasons that we chose to live in Arizona is it's a very natural and a very outside type of environment. The weather's great most of the year. So, we could be out riding bikes. We could be doing a hike, taking the dogs for a walk, golfing, or something like that. But it's probably happening outside. It's probably happening with my wife and my two boys, and we're doing something in and around the area. Even vacations are very much like that. We're one of those families that when we're in vacations, we're probably outside, whether it's being on a ski mountain or whether it's being in the ocean at the beach, we're probably outside. So an ideal day just to unwind for me is doing something where I just disconnect from technology and don't have my phone in my hand, or I'm not at a screen, and I'm spending time with them.
That sounds so perfect. Thank you again, Bill. It was a pleasure speaking to you. I'm sure we are going to do a follow up on this podcast next year and talk about agentic space and how people have adopted it. Thank you again, Bill.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thank you for having me. And I'll one leave behind for all of the viewers of the episode is if you go to my LinkedIn and follow me, I have and this is interesting. I have about 75 use cases of where AI is being applied inside the go-to-market. And that list, it's a public list. I just publish it, and it's a live doc, and it grows every day by me putting more and more on there. So probably in the next couple of weeks, I'll probably get up to over 100. Now, in all honesty, I'm one of those people that if you gave me a list of 100 things, it's kind of hard for me to consume. So the first thing I would do is probably put it into a chat GPT and say, summarize this for me by theme or something like that. But to the point of what we talked about, Manisha, in your podcast, my goal with that is to spend the next couple of weeks collecting more use cases.
Okay.
And then I am going to try and distill it down into probably 5 top ones that I think every company should do. So going back to what I thought my prediction would be for 2026, I'm going to try and lead that. I'm going to try and suggest that every company should have this type of workflow or this type of function inside of their go-to-market.
Wow, that's great. We really need a reference architecture for AI in 2026. And I'm going to, call my product managers now and tell them go grab that list and see what we are solving and what we need to solve more.
Yeah, do it, do it. Like I said, there's a lot on there, so you gotta kind of like go through them. So take advantage of what we talked about in this whole podcast and throw it into some AI and let it help you.
Sounds good. Thanks, Bill. Have a good one.
Thank you for having me.